The cursor blinked, once, twice. It was 3 a.m., and the city outside was a tomb of silence. Ethan leaned into the glow of his monitor, his eyes tracking the line of code that refused to compile. He hit delete, watched the characters vanish, and typed again. His bank account balance sat in the corner of his browser, $42. It was the total sum of his survival. For 3 years, he had spent his days building database updates for a firm that valued nothing but efficiency. He was a ghost in the machine, drafting lines of text that meant nothing to anyone. Every night, he returned to this cramped room, ignoring the sharp, persistent ache of hunger in his gut to work on his own project. The screen flickered, casting long, jittery shadows against the peeling paint of the walls. He sat back, the plastic chair groaning under his weight. He had no safety net, no savings, and no prospects beyond the next line of logic. He tapped the desk, rhythmically, waiting for the compile to finish. It failed again. He let out a long, ragged breath that rattled in his chest. He was running out of time, running out of money, and the code remained as broken as his bank account. The next morning, Ethan walked into the meeting room with his laptop and a set of printed wireframes. He laid them out across the table, explaining the mechanics of his app, a system to bridge real-time user needs with local service providers. The room went quiet for a heartbeat, then the laughter started. It was not loud, but it was sharp. A colleague leaned back, pointing at a diagram with a dismissive flick of a finger. "Why would anyone need this?" he asked, his voice dripping with condescension. Others joined in, shaking their heads, treating the concept like a child's hobby. Ethan watched them. He saw the way they looked at the screen, then at him, their expressions fixed in patronizing amusement. He did not defend his work. He did not argue. He simply gathered his papers, closed the laptop, and walked out of the room. Back at his desk, the fluorescent lights hummed above him. He sat down, opened the lid, and stared at the dark screen. The laughter still echoed in the hallway, but he ignored it. He began to type. His fingers moved with a new, cold precision. The idea was his, and he would build it regardless of what the room believed. The audit arrived on a rainy Tuesday. His manager dropped a thick, heavy stack of files onto the desk, covering the keyboard. "Abandon the personal projects," the manager said, tapping the papers. "Focus on the audit, or you are finished here." Ethan looked at the files, then at the man standing over him. The decision did not take a second. He pushed the files aside, stood up, and walked past the rows of desks toward the HR office. He handed in his resignation letter without a word. He did not look back. He did not wait for a response. He walked to the glass doors of the lobby and pushed them open. The cold air hit him instantly, sharp and biting against his skin. He stood on the sidewalk as the rain began to fall harder, washing the grime of the office off his mind. He had no job, no backup plan, and no source of income. He looked up at the gray sky, feeling the weight of the city pressing down. He was completely untethered. For the first time in years, the silence in his head matched the silence of the street. He turned and started walking, leaving the firm and his old life behind in the mist. 4 months passed, and the bank account finally hit zero. The reality was not a sudden crash, but a slow, quiet depletion. Ethan packed his clothes into the trunk of his sedan, the lid struggling to close over the final bag. He drove until the city lights dimmed and the industrial haze took over. He found a spot in a secluded lot near the city docks, surrounded by rusting shipping containers. He killed the engine. The silence that followed was absolute. He climbed into the back seat, folding the cushions flat to create a makeshift bed. He wrapped himself in a thin, worn blanket that did little to block the damp chill seeping through the metal frame. He lay on his back, staring at the gray ceiling of the car, watching the faint reflection of a distant street lamp dance across the plastic. His breath hitched in the cold air, forming small clouds that vanished into the dark. The metal of the car ticked as it cooled. He did not sleep. He laid his head against the door and stared at the roof, mapping out the architecture of his next update, knowing that tomorrow, the only thing he would own was his code. The morning ritual became his only anchor. He walked 3 blocks to the gym, paid for a day pass, and stood under the hot spray until his muscles stopped shaking. He emerged into the lobby, damp and shivering, and opened his laptop on a plastic bench. He hit the upload button. The app was live. He watched the screen, waiting for the first wave of users. It took less than an hour for the system to buckle. The interface froze. Buttons turned unresponsive. He typed frantic patches, fingers stiff from the morning chill. Refreshing the dashboard revealed the damage. 1 star. Another 1 star. Comments flooded in. Broken. Useless. Why does it crash every time I open it? He read the words until they blurred into a single, jagged line of failure. His stomach cramped from a lack of food, but he could not pull his eyes away from the screen. He deleted a line of corrupted code, his hands trembling against the keyboard. The lobby lights flickered above him. He stared at the error logs, the weight of the rejection settling into his shoulders. He was exhausted. He was hungry. And he was failing in front of the entire world. The inbox notifications dinged with a rhythm that felt like hammer strikes. Every email was a variation of the same message. Not interested, too high risk. No. Ethan sat in the driver's seat, his back arched against the steering wheel to stay upright. The car interior was a tomb of frosted glass and damp breath. He swiped through the rejection list, his fingers moving sluggishly against the trackpad. His body demanded rest, his core temperature dipping dangerously low, but he forced his eyes to stay fixed on the cursor. A sharp, rhythmic tremor took hold of his hands. He tried to type, but his digits wouldn't obey. He dropped the laptop, the screen hitting the gear shift with a hollow plastic crack. He sat in the dark for a long minute, listening to the city wake up beyond the windshield. Then, he reached down, retrieved the machine, and wiped the condensation from the screen. He ignored the hunger that gnawed at his ribs. He opened the source files, highlighted the entire core architecture, and deleted it. It was time to start over. As the horizon turned a faint, bruised purple, he began to write the new logic, line by line, his pulse steadying with every keystroke. The notification ping was different this time. It was not a rejection, it was a surge. Ethan tapped the screen, squinting at the server analytics dashboard. A single line graph, previously flat for months, spiked vertically. He refreshed the page. The number of active users jumped from 10 to 500 in seconds. He scrambled to open the browser, searching for the source. A video from a prominent tech influencer was already trending, the screen showing his app interface in crisp, high-definition detail. The link was live. Traffic began to hammer the database with the force of a tidal wave. He watched the logs scroll by, lines of code flashing too fast to read. The car dashboard lights dimmed as the heat from the laptop radiated against his knees. The download counter ticked upward, a blur of digits that refused to stop. 10,000, 20,000. The server load warning turned from yellow to a deep, pulsing red. He held his breath, his hands hovering over the keys, waiting for the system to crash under the weight. It held. 50,000, 80,000. The silence of the parking lot felt absolute compared to the digital roar inside the machine. 100,000 downloads. He stared at the screen, unable to look away, his pulse thumping in his ears. The phone vibrated against the plastic console, a relentless sequence of pings from firms and investors who had refused his calls for months. Ethan ignored them. He kept his eyes on the terminal. The traffic was massive, but the interface was failing. Below the download ticker, a small bug caused the primary navigation buttons to drift whenever a user refreshed the page. It was a minor error, yet it gnawed at him. He bypassed the flood of congratulatory messages, marking them as unread. He didn't care about the surge or the sudden status. He reached for his water bottle, found it empty, and set it aside. His fingers tapped the keys with deliberate precision. He isolated the CSS conflict, rewrote the alignment logic, and compiled the patch. The car was freezing, the temperature outside dropping with the sunset, but he felt the heat of the processor on his lap. He pushed the update to the server. The buttons locked into place. The interface stabilized. He leaned back against the driver's seat, his head hitting the window glass. The download count was still climbing, now past 150,000, but the app was finally solid. He closed the laptop lid, silencing the glow, and exhaled into the quiet dark of the lot. 3 years later, the silence of the parking lot was replaced by the hum of climate-controlled air in a glass-walled boardroom. Ethan stood at the head of the mahogany table, looking out at the city skyline. Far below, the streets were mere lines of light. On the table before him, The valuation report lay open. The document stated a market worth of $1 billion. He traced the edge of the paper with his thumb, but his attention drifted toward the window reflection. He did not see the suit he wore or the polished surface of the table. Instead, a phantom scent hit him, the stale, trapped smell of worn fabric and dust from his old sedan. It was a sharp, grounding sensation that cut through the sterile atmosphere of the room. He remembered the specific angle of the driver's seat and the cold glass against his head during those long, uncertain nights. The board members sat in wait, their eyes fixed on him for a statement, but he remained quiet. He stood as a man holding a billion-dollar empire, yet his mind was anchored to a parking lot at the city docks. That smell was the only thing that felt real. The board members shifted in their chairs, awaiting his final words. Ethan looked away from the window and back to the table. He did not speak of the money or the growth metrics. He understood the architecture of the journey now. A vision begins as a flickering thought in the mind, gains structure through thousands of lines of code, and only then manifests as a reality in the world. This was the sequence that had defined his life. It was a process of constant iteration, where doubt was just another variable to solve. He looked down at his open laptop, the screen reflecting the high-ceilinged room. He tapped the trackpad once, putting the machine into sleep mode, and clicked the lid shut. The sound was a sharp, final snap that echoed against the glass walls. The billion-dollar valuation remained on the paper, but his mind had already shifted. He felt no need to dwell on the summit. He stood up, turned away from the table, and walked toward the door. The path ahead was empty, and for the first time in 3 years, the silence was not a burden. It was a blank canvas. He was ready for the next idea.